A wise man once said, variety is the spice of life. A wiser man pointed out that Mystara is the Thai food of D&D settings. Now we're exploring Alphatia's largest kingdom, the northern realm of Foresthome. Despite the name, it's not one solid forest, but a collection of wooded areas scattered across 18 provinces, with a rather unusual governmental type and a rogues gallery of sylvan creatures living there. The Queen does her best to be the part of the Alphatian Empire without actually adopting any of their culture. So how does a large number of non-Alphatians play nice with the dysfunctional Empire? Welcome to Mystara, and you can't see the forest because of the trees. Foresthome is located in northeastern Alphatia, sandwiched between floating Ar in the north and Bedolin in the south, with the imperial territories to the west. It is the largest of the Alphatian kingdoms, but not by a significant margin. It's known for its vast woodlands, with the lonely forest dominating the center. Despite its name, it doesn't have the largest forests. Blackheart takes that honor. But it does have more woodlands than any other kingdom. It does have the largest population of Fey and Sylvan creatures in Alphatia, making up the majority of creatures in several domains. Foresthome is one of the most diverse regions in Alphatia, with more than a dozen races making up the majority of the Foresthomies. Foresthome joined the Alphatian Empire through diplomacy rather than force, unlike most of their neighbors. The Empire showed up, discovered they would be fighting a guerrilla war against elves, Fey folk, and Sylvan types in a large number of forests, and decided maybe they should talk this one out. The wizards had all sorts of magic available to them, but so did a large number of the creatures they were facing. With magically mutually assured destruction looming, the Emperor and the nobles of Foresthome came to an agreement. The King or Queen of Foresthome would swear fealty to the throne of Alphatia, and the Foresthomies would stay loyal to the Queen. The kingdom has almost no interference from the imperial throne as long as they provide troops and pay taxes. The only thing the throne has influence over is the Alphatian settlers who moved into Foresthome, but they're restricted to the open lands and aren't allowed to settle the woods in most places. The kingdom is divided by clans, and by clans I mean different races. Some are common in Mystara, others are native to just Foresthome. The goodly folk have multiple races serving as clans, such as the Woodimps or Pixies, though Woodimps technically aren't Fey anymore. There's a group of sentient Decapus lurking in one of the forests, along with Treants and Phanatons and others. Other races that first appeared in other settings have their Mystaran debut in Foresthome with the Wimics and the Nymphs. There's multiple Sylvan races, such as the Shargu, Treants, along with a few variants, and the Sasquatch. Then you get the new races that Bruce Hurd invented, but need some actual names and not just be known as the Woodmen, Bushmen, Ravenfolk, and Forest Giants. These Forest Giants are not the Voadkin of first edition. These are full-blown 30-foot-tall giants with skin that has the appearance of bark. Then you have the Gulan, or the Wolverine people. More on them later. Despite its size, Foresthome does not have a large population compared to similar nations. It has 1.7 million inhabitants, but only 7% of the nation is settled. Humans are the plurality, but elves are close behind them, with the other races evenly mixed. No one comes close to 50% of the population. Despite this, humans make up the bulk of Foresthome's army. As per the original agreement, the nation still has to supply troops to the Empire. The catch is, the clans are loyal to the Queen, not the Empress. Humans were not part of the original clans, so they're still subject to the Empire's laws. This means Queen Aberia uses human troops to fulfill her oath and the settlers' duties. The Foresthomies can serve in the military, but humans comprise about 85% of the army, with Fey creatures in second place at just under 10%. There's a movement to create an actual army to guard Foresthome against her enemies, and by enemies I mean Bedolin. It's pretty much the only place in the Empire that Foresthome doesn't get along with. Well, except for Frislin and Blackheart, but at least they keep to themselves. They might be creepy neighbors, but at least they mind their own business. Bedolin likes to fight, and they have their eyes on their northern neighbor. One major source of conflict, if not the biggest conflict in Foresthome, is the League of Eight. Years ago, when the nation was undergoing financial difficulties, the reigning king allowed the Merchants Guild to gain significant political power in exchange for bailing out the nation. Now the guild dominates trades in most parts of the kingdom and uses underhanded tactics to increase their power. They strive to maintain monopoly power over all aspects of foreign trade, set tariffs, and push rival merchants out of lucrative markets. Many of the nobles are in debt to the League, and there have been accusations of dirty dealings. Even crimes like arson, assault, and even murder are no strangers to the League. And now they're pressuring Queen Aberia to give them control over the coastline, which would all but assure their monopoly status. The Queen is the latest in a long line of monarchs dating back to the Alphatian arrival. Her duties are split between the great clans of her kingdom and the Empire. Part of the agreement in the founding of Foresthome was respecting the rights and traditions of its inhabitants, while she handled all dealings with the imperial throne. It's strange that the highly diverse Sylvan races have a human monarch, but when Foresthome joined Alphatia, the Empire got to appoint the ruler as part of their bargain. The Foresthome monarchs have proven capable, and the arrangement has proven wise over the years. Aberia obtained the position when her husband, King Taltheon, had to abdicate due to illness. He fell sick after refusing the demands of the League of Eight, though no one could prove the disease's cause was nefarious. Still, it's proven impossible to cure even with magical means. The Queen is now being heavily pressured by the League to give in to their demands, but she's proven resourceful in thwarting them. When they demanded a vote, she elevated their demands to the Wizards' Parliament, the lawmaking body of Foresthome. She wisely figured that the Parliament's divided politics would delay the request indefinitely because of the guaranteed deadlock that would ensue. When the League again pressed their demands, she pointed out that the issue was before Parliament and therefore out of her hands. The vote has been delayed another year while the League and their enemies lobby for support. Aberia spends most of her time dealing with the conflicts between the great clans as well as relations with her neighbors. Bedelin's military intentions are the primary exterior threat to Foresthome. Oddly enough, this has caused her to ally with the nation of Randall, a country that has little contact with Foresthome. The reason behind this alliance is the classic principle of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Randall despises the armies and clerics of Bedlin, and if Foresthome can help defeat the nation, so much the better. The plot against the Queen is deeply entrenched and goes much deeper than she suspects. Her husband was indeed laid low by the League of Eight, but even they were being played. Pretty much everybody in this plot is conspiring against each other, and no one knows what the actual goal of the other accomplices are. The League wants to control the nation, behind the scenes of course. What they don't realize is the nation of Bedlin is the one secretly funding their actions to destabilize Foresthome to make their future conquest that much easier. Playing both sides of this conspiracy is the druid Kelbardine, who was hired to provide the poison that struck down the king. Only he's a member of the Green Circle, an evil druidic group devoted to the Decapus Queen. He plans to bring down the royal family by turning the former king into a hideous monster that will devour his family. Then Kelbardine will lead the Queen's troops against the scattered great clans, securing control over the entirety of Foresthome. The Foresthome government is divided between the Great Clan House and the Wizards' Parliament. The first is comprised of delegates from each province and tends to concern itself with internal matters. The Wizards' Parliament consists of representatives from the various nobles to act as a balance to the great clans. The Queen has a seat on both groups but has no vote and can only observe their debates as a guest. Both houses can pass laws, but as befits Alphatian politics, both are crippled by bureaucracy and internal strife. The Great Clan House needs a majority of eligible votes to pass a law, not just those voting. If enough delegates abstain, then the vote fails. The Parliament needs 60 votes to pass rather than a simple majority, and again abstaining can doom a vote. In practice, very few laws get passed because of the constant infighting between the clans and the nobles. That concludes the government and the history of Foresthome. But who are these forest homies that make up the nation? There are 18 distinct provinces, many divided between various sylvan creatures not found anywhere else. The regions are often insular, and more than a few don't get along. But all of them support Foresthome and are content letting Queen Aberia deal with the Empire and their neighbors. Alright everybody, go get a refreshing beverage. This one's going to get beefy. Southernmoor is the southeastern domain in Foresthome, sharing a border with Bedlin. It is mostly human and broken into 3 terrain types. The lowlands are the richest, mostly farmland and some livestock. It also has Tenobo, the largest city in the county. The highlands are found on a plateau and are the first line of defense against Bedlin. It has some agriculture, but sparsely populated. The mountains are the third region, populated by mountain and stone giants. These are often hired as mercenaries, especially the mountain giants. There is an intelligent group of spiders living in the foothills, which fluctuate between indifferent and outright hostility with outsiders. It's unsure if these are planar spiders, Aranea, or a new type of intelligent spider, but they're not statted out like other creatures found in the Foresthome section. Their lands have been conquered in the past, but they've always driven out the attackers later. This means they're either capable of hiding underground or they go extraplanar. Southmoor's biggest conflict is with Bedlin and its intrusive actions against it. The penalty for proselytizing inside the borders is branding and expulsion, something that infuriates the southern neighbor. The county's natural defenses are formidable, including the plateau and multiple bottlenecks and fords. If Bedlin wishes to invade, it will be more than likely a naval assault. This is the reason why most of Southernmoor's ports are heavily fortified. Bedlin's clerics object strongly to the giants common in the mountains and their acceptance in human society. The giants take umbrage to this, and in return offer discounts to their mercenary work if it's against Bedlin. The county of Tuttleby is due south of Southernmoor and also borders Bedlin. Where their neighboring county has many natural defenses, Tuttleby has to make do with man-made fortifications. It has been overrun by Bedlin attacks numerous times in the past, and has rebuilt each time. There is a weak point in their defense with a gradual slope leading into the plateau, and the count is trying to build defenses to close the weakness. But between sabotage, corruption, and outright incompetence, this project is taking far longer than expected. One issue the county has is that large parts of it is controlled by the League of Eight, as they financed the last rebuilding. Nothing gets done in Tuttleby that doesn't profit the League. The wild card in all of this is the Wemmicks. These are lion centaurs, and their first appearance in Mystara, so everybody give our furry friends a warm welcome. These guys used to be huge in the TSR days for a few years, and they've gradually faded into memory. It's glad to see them back, and even happier to have Bruce stat them out for Beckme. These guys like to run around and beat people up. It's their favorite hobby.
I want to beat people up right now!
They aren't exactly the diplomatic types, and their interests are pretty simple and straightforward. They raid Bedlin whenever they want. They go after the farms and ranches in Tuttleby and Sothermore. The only people they like are the giants, who apparently give really good scritches. They are a thorn in the side of just about everybody, and especially hate the encroaching clerics. The only reason why Tuttleby tolerates them is they are really good at fighting and annoy Bedlin far more than they irritate their Foresthome neighbors. The counties of Berwyn and Orpheander used to be a single domain. Then somebody stole a pig. That's pretty much where the knowledge of that event ends, because both counties have their version of the truth. Apparently somebody stole the animal from the rightful owner, or they took it back from the person that refused to turn it over. Lines were drawn, swords were drawn, and people were drawn, then quartered. Finally, the monarch of the time broke the domain in two and put an army unit between both of them to make sure nobody crossed the line. Citizens in the rival county are not allowed to cross the border, and only nobles are allowed to visit, but only after presenting their credentials. The Queen has standing orders to be provided with a headache cure when the two families approach her with their latest squabble. As far as the troops given the thankless task of dealing with the families,
I'm telling you, ready to shoot them both. Yep, right there with you.
Their one unifying opinion is that both counties have a dislike of the Bushmen, which aren't even men. These creatures are either a new elven subrace or at least a cousin of them. And they deserve a better name than just Bushmen. It makes you think of African Bushmen, but they don't resemble or act anything like them. They're more like the Grugok of Greyhawk, the Wild Elves, with some druidic powers. But otherwise look like disheveled elves with wild hair and little use for more civilized groups. They think the humans are acting like idiots, and the humans distrust them. Many people believe the Bushmen are isolationists, but they just don't want anything to do with their neighbors, which the Foresthome troops completely understand. The Bushmen are one of the great clans and do send delegates when votes are called. The county of Wrathmore lies due north of Tuttleby and is one of the more difficult counties to reach. It's bisected by the Highlands, and the eastern half of the region can only be reached from the northern approach. Wrathmore is connected to the royal family due to one of their ancestors proving a competent commander to an ancient king. This trait has been passed down through the ages, as the Wrathmore family is known for its competency and diplomatic skills. They have agreements with numerous other domains, and while they're not well liked, they are highly respected. The county is currently engaged in a running feud with the League of Eight after an assassin was killed trying to off-count Wrathmore after he placed sanctions on the League due to price gouging. The assassin discovered that the county's troops also had the same reputation for competence as their lord. While nothing could be proven to the assassin's employer, the next night a League ship accidentally burned to the waterline with all of its cargo, but with no loss of life. Both sides despise each other, but realize a boycott or a ban would cost more than it's worth. One reason for the wisdom of Count Wrathmore and his ancestors is their friendship with the Ravenfolk, a race of humanoid avians that live in the domain's forests and hills. These creatures all have the gift of prophecy and will approach those who are about to be in danger. They don't give their advice freely, and there's always a cost that must be paid. The Ravenfolk were the ones that saved the Count's life from the assassin. They performed a similar task for one of his ancestors, and ever since, the Wrathmore family has put at least one Ravenfolk on retainer. The creatures can use magic to appear as humans, so few know of their actual form. These guys, like the Bushmen, need a better name. They have a passing resemblance to the Kinku of other settings, but nothing else in common. Plus, these guys can fly. Such is their reputation that they scare the Wemmick. It's hard to sneak up on somebody who can see it coming. Heading north from Wrathmore, we arrive at Linmouth, and it is one of the best-run domains in all of Foresthome. It became wealthy through agriculture and trade. It's well-run, and has been able to keep the League of Eight under control. The Count has been petitioning the Queen to be elevated to a duke, and it looks like he has the political backing to earn it. He has restricted the League to just his port city, meaning the farmers and ranchers further inland can't be exploited by their machinations. This also allows him to set taxes on the goods before the League can tariff them. In addition to this, Linmouth's guards are professional and well-behaved. They're even-handed in their justice, and this has earned them the support of the citizens. Living in the forests of the county are several creatures native to the region. The first are the woodmen, another race that seriously needs a better name. These are a treant variant, resembling a wooden man about the size of an ogre. They are kind-hearted creatures that will defend their allies with overwhelming force. Many years ago, they fought a war alongside some elves, and as was their tradition, the woodmen mixed their sap with the elves after the battle. But this had an unexpected consequence. The elves were changed into the bushmen, but the woodmen who received elf blood became dark and twisted, becoming blackroot treants. These look like dead trees, but they're still alive. They gain sustenance by drinking blood, but they do keep that fact to themselves. Because they aren't hostile to those outside their forest, they're considered one of the great clans. Still, you don't go berry picking in their woods. The Queensland is the royal domain that houses the nation's capital of Greenwood. Here, Queen Aberia runs the nation, and most humans call it home. This region came about because of the Oath of Preservation that created Foresthome. The great clans accepted the rule of an Alphatian monarch on the grounds that their cultures and lifestyles would be left alone. The first king of Foresthome chose the royal domain because of its large population of bushmen, showing that the humans and the elfkin could live in peace. The region was poor at first, but with the discovery of silver and the establishment of modern facilities, wealth came in a matter of years. Queensland is home to most of the nation's organizations. Here, the League of Eight has its headquarters, as well as the headquarters of the National Army and Navy. In addition, the Foresthome Rangers were founded here, a group of humans and elves that serve as the public face of the Queen's power across the country. They double as messengers between the great clans and are often used as delegates for emergency votes. Despite any disputes between the crown and the clans, everyone respects the Rangers for what they represent. Even the Blackroot Treants and the Wimicks leave them alone out of respect. Besides, who knows when even they're going to need the services of the Rangers. The county of Hornmain is a heavily wooded area found to the north of Foresthome, and even in the areas that don't have trees, few people live there. It is the home of the Gulan, which in theory was a race of humans that were turned into werewolverines or werverines, until a sorceress altered their curse. A sorceress named Maritha the Furrier. The woman that made Mystara's Wolverine people was Maritha the Furrier.
You serious?
Now they're a race of near humans that still turn into giant wolverines, only they have far greater control over the transformation. By greater control, I mean sometimes they can resist it. The Gulan are barely human, if you want to even call them that, with thick, coarse hair over their bodies, hands that end in claws, and thick bone structures. If you slightly piss them off, they will rough you up. If you really piss them off, they will turn into giant wolverines. If you moderately piss them off, they consider that a turn-on.
You killed my father!
After you killed my partner.
You took my eye!
After you took my heart.
So their entire culture is based around slap, slap, kiss, kiss. And before the bard gets any ideas, Gulan's made for life. Don't make the angry woman who turns into a sedan-sized wolverine come looking for you. Since the Gulans have gone from full-on lycanthropes to a society that takes the rules of Fight Club as sacred scripture, people have moved into the open regions that the Gulan haven't bothered to settle. The natives stick to small villages in the Weeping Harnbosk's forest. These are so called because after what they did to the only enemy that tried to attack them, even the trees were crying out for them to stop. Outsiders are allowed through the region by boat, but they're not allowed to disembark. Leave the Gulan alone, and they will ignore you. They aren't openly hostile, but they have an entirely different mindset from other creatures. To them, having a friend with benefits is the one that punches you without the claws. The county of Grunfold, to the west of Hornmain, is one populated by commoners who fled the plantations of Ar to find some degree of freedom. This didn't sit well with their masters back in the land of the floating nation, but the wizards discovered Grunfold was home to a rather accommodating race of creatures more than happy to take in the former slaves. The Sasquatches. The wizards of Ar were repulsed by the region's protectors, and before the war could escalate, the king of Foresthome welcomed the refugees and agreed to terms with the Alphatian throne to cement the borders and claim the newcomers as brand new Foresthomies. Ar didn't end the hostilities just yet, but after another round of attacks on the farms and forests, Imperial troops arrived to remind everybody where the borders were drawn. Peace ensued. Years later, an army of ogres raided from the ridge on the western border of the nation, burning farms and settlements alike. Initial thoughts were these humanoids were stirred up by the wizards in Ar, at least until the ogres attacked that nation as well. Finally, Foresthome and Ar buried the magic wand and had to cooperate to put down the ogre invasion. And this finally brought the two nations to a peaceful status. Now Grunfold is a tranquil land with humans farming the open fields and Sasquatches running the forests making beef jerky. They're generally left alone, partly because they have nothing of value to steal, and also because the Sasquatches will make anybody who hurts their human friends several feet shorter with their clubs. The county of Ashberry sits at the northern part of Lynn Lake and was settled by humans as the only open space they could find that didn't have fairies making their lives unpredictable, or Wolverine cosplayers looking for a scrum. The area had been settled by a long-lost race in the past, one that was so twisted and evil that the other clans drove it to extinction. The capital of Shog sits on the ancient land of these creatures, and the druids say it still bears their dark magic. The countess is feared to be tainted by this legacy, and the druids cast spells and give her potions to hold back the magics. Her guard captain doesn't believe in the legacy and thinks the druids are just trying to control her. He wants to explore the catacombs underneath the city to find and destroy this source of magic. This will either cure the countess of her ills, or unleash a terrible evil back onto the surface. To the north of Ashberry are the forest giants. These are massive creatures standing 30 feet tall and are instantly recognized by their bark-like skin, and the fact that they're the tallest of all the giant races. You'll probably notice that these guys are 3 stories tall before you notice they're covered in bark. They are peaceful and friends with most sylvan creatures. They even respect the blackroot treants, and while they disagree with each other, are on friendly terms. They're held in high regard by Countess Ashberry, as anybody approaching from the north to deal the region harm has to go through the giants. Thanks to their druidic abilities, they can release a cloud of dandelion-like seeds, which the giants can all see what's in their cloud. If killed, their blood invigorates the forest, healing plant creatures and killing the undead. This also causes plants to grow at an accelerated rate. Forest giant blood supercharges treants and pisses them off at the same time. So if you want to go off and kill a forest giant, you had best get ready for round 2 pretty quick. The clan lands are the largest of the woodlands found in Foresthome, and this was the Great Clan's original home. You will find just about every sylvan creature here, even some you've never heard of. There is a huge contingent of goodly folk cavorting around, who were quite friendly with the sylvan creatures, but capricious to everyone else. All manner of fey creatures can be found here, though pixies far outnumber all the rest. Nymphs make their appearance in Mystara here, at least with the Beckme rules. These are a bit more complicated than their older version, as their powers and attitudes change with the season. Bear in mind, all versions of the nymph still have the save or die ability against peeping toms. Remind the bard of that before you cross into their territory, or else it's going to take the coroner 8 hours to get the smile off his face. Other sylvan creatures found in the region are the Phanatons and Shargu, a stealthy yet rather kleptomaniac race. And at least that one finally gets a pronunciation guide by saying that the name is different depending on your accent. Nice cop-out. I'll give him points for that one, though. You've also got some treants and gackarats running around. Oh yeah, and a whole mess of Decapus. You remember those 10-armed ambush TPK machines from the Palace of the Silver Princess? There's hundreds of them running around their section of the forest. They even have a giant leader known as the Green Queen, and she is the unholy mother of the total party kill. She is an ancient creature dating back before the destruction of Shog. She's sentient, and she keeps her Decapus in line. By that, I mean they only attack en masse when she lets them. And if she doesn't get enough tribute from the surrounding regions, that can be more often than you think. She does obey the law of the clans and has rangers convey her messages to other leaders when she wants something. Still, she's a 60-foot-tall Decapus with 100 limbs, acid breath, and can cast spells. She doesn't attack with all the tentacles at once, but instead attacks with 10 bundles of them at a time. And these can require a save versus being ripped in half. This is not your grandmother's octopus. Just a warning. In her defense, she might be a terrifying eldritch abomination, but at least she's a terrifying eldritch abomination that pays lip service to the laws of the land. The county of Wessith is located on the western shores of Lynn Lake and was the site of some of the fiercest battles in the expansion of Foresthome against the humanoids that originally lived here. The area has quite a bit of open land, more than other regions, because it was necessary to clear many of the woods in the fight against the humanoids. The great clans consider this tragic but necessary, as trees can be replanted, but they wanted the orcs and goblins gone. While they might hold grudges for wrongs inflicted on the land by the humans, in this case they get a pass. People are forbidden from venturing into the forests that do remain, which is fine by most, as they prefer to till their farms and fear all manners of beasts that are assumed to lurk in the woods. The druids that have claimed the woods here are supposed to drive out the monsters and protect the settlers. In reality, they guard a terrible secret, a spell that was created by the leaders of the great clans ages ago. The spell of burgeoning was designed to restore the sylvan lands to what they were before the arrival of the Alphatians. This would cause giant forests to erupt across Foresthome, destroying towns and displacing the humans. To activate this spell, it would require the leader of every great clan to say their part. But fortunately for most, the secret has been lost, except for a handful of druids devoted to keeping it a secret. And a giant Decapus queen that doesn't share the same opinion. The county of Mercy and Weal lies to the south of Wessith and was founded after the wars against the humanoids finally came to their conclusion. Rather than picking new homes in the ruins of the war zone that was their northern neighbor, they moved to a region that was spared from all the burning and slaughter and salting. Here the humans made new homes, setting up farms and clearing land for livestock. The farmers are prosperous, but the county is considered remote and politically weak compared to the larger and more prosperous areas. The farmers did make one mistake by clearing forests to make room for their livestock. In doing so, they angered the natives that had laid claim to this area. Things came to a head when a small army of Woodimps emerged from the forest and demanded recompense for the lost trees. Woodimps were once fey creatures until they got so obnoxious that King Oberon, or a similar powerful archfey, stripped them of their immortal status and reduced them to mere mortals. This hasn't changed their personality one bit. They had lived in the woods before Foresthome, and they wanted payment for their lost trees. The Druids made an agreement. The humans would stop clearing the trees, and the Woodimps would be free to enter human settlements for purposes of trade and travel. They're still obnoxious little gleets, but the humans have to treat them like any other race. The Woodimps revel in this agreement by being as rude, messy, loud, and engaging in any behavior that the humans have to put up with. They are one of the great clans and won't hesitate to run to the Queen to register a complaint if the humans object to their antics. A deal is a deal, after all. The county of Tarsten Wall was originally contested by Bedouin and the sylvan and fey creatures calling it home. The Bedouiners dispatched clerics and settlers to claim the lands and built farms and forts to enforce this claim. Unfortunately, the native species in the area, namely actaeons, which are large elkatars with magical abilities, were less than welcoming. Other races in the area included hags like the Crone of Chaos, and a plant-like humanoid called a Florian that pushed the settlers out of the area. The Bedouiners fled and set up border forts that remain to this day. Then the human forest homies arrived, which were much more respectable to the creatures living there, and started settling the land. And a long and drawn-out war started before the royal army of Foresthome ended it by adding their weight to the settlers and establishing a count to rule over the area. Then he was immediately given a lien by the League of Eight for all the money they had spent financing the war. Pretty much every farmstead and city had borrowed huge amounts of money to afford it. The League wasn't going to let that slide. So now they dominate the region by enforcing their laws, collecting their taxes, and forbidding other merchants from directly competing with them. That was centuries ago. Even today, the rigged contracts set up by the League are still in effect, and the current Count Tarsten hasn't even begun to pay off his ancestors' debts. Because of this, the League of Eight is the de facto ruler of the county, with its lord just rubber-stamping their demands into law. The Principality of Lindsay is an island found in the middle of Lynn Lake and is considered the vacation spot for the Foresthome nobility. Long ago, a monarch of Foresthome wanted a place that the crown prince could rule over, one distant from the politics of Greenwood, and also a safe place in case somebody wanted to take out the royal family, as in murder them, not give them a good time. So a town was built on the island, troops were stationed, and the prince was tasked with running the domain like it was a kingdom. This gave the heir apparent experience in ruling while limiting the threat to the throne. As such, the towns here tend to be opulent, while all sorts of manors, resorts, and entertainment venues scattered throughout. The commoners live on the outskirts, with a large group of miners digging up recently discovered copper. This, of course, is done away from the nobles so they don't have to watch manual labor. The island was chosen for the principality because it had no native sylvan life, as they didn't have to worry about offending or angering natives. However, mistakes were made. A race of frogmen called the Broga live in the marshes on the east side of the swamp. They were missed by the original explorers because who wants to go mucking around in a swamp? Fortunately, the Broga were amenable to their new neighbors, and the crown princess made them a deal. If they would behave themselves and leave the humans alone, they could have the swamp all to themselves, and the humans would protect them against anyone that threatened them. Sounded like a good idea to the princess, because the Alphatians weren't going to go anywhere near that swamp. But she made a mistake. She forgot to ask if the Broga were already threatened. It turned out they had been fighting a group of Copra that had lived in the steam vents common to the island. Now royal troops are engaged in an ancient conflict with one of Mystara's most dangerous creatures. The Duchy of Westford was created inadvertently in the war between the Sylvan folk and the creatures responsible for the city of Shog. The former masters of the area used humanoid troops as their preferred forces, and they learned the best way to defeat the woodland creatures was to remove the woods. As such, Westford is mostly grasslands, as the majority of their forests were destroyed in the war. This drove out almost all the Sylvan races, with one exception. It became the perfect terrain for centaurs, who fought the humanoids to a stalemate. Then the arrival of Alphatian troops tipped the balance in their favor, and the two sides agreed to create the domain of Westford, and then elevated it to the status of a duchy because of its size and population. The centaurs, or greater equines as they call themselves, have an elevated status with the humans compared to the other great clans, and participate in local affairs on a greater scale compared to sylvan creatures in other domains. Towns will have facilities custom made for the horse folk, even to the point of having invented latrines just for the centaurs. The centaur religion is the cult of Equus, an aspect of Zerchev the Hunter. Even the Cheval, despite being fey creatures, will give grudging respect to the clerics of the religion. The cult believes that those who fall in the service of Equus will return as a horse spirit or a spirit rider if a human. The domain does have a large number of natured spirits found in its borders, and most of these are horse spirits. The cult also protects equine creatures such as pegasi and unicorns, though the latter is rare. Pegatars have started to settle in the area, and they are held in the highest esteem by the centaurs. The Pegatars recognize this and thank the centaurs for recognizing the superiority of their winged cousins. Because Pegatars. The Marches of Ogresfell are an unincorporated area bordering Floating R and were the home of the ogres and other humanoids that longed warred with the sylvan races until their destruction by a combined force of the Foresthome and R. The war was the first time that all the great clans turned out in force to fight alongside the humans, and is considered the moment that Foresthome went from a colony to an actual kingdom. The final defeat of the ogres occurred with the arrival of the Grey Ones, a clan of sylvan elves that left Shilar over a dispute on customs. The elves just showed up, killed the ogre queen, and called dibs on the region. While it's not a recognized claim, the elves are allowed to build cities and make improvements to the region. The elves have settled into the domain and will soon petition for recognition of their claims. Their biggest gripe with the Shilar elves was their use of stone in building materials and other uses. You wouldn't suspect you were in a Grey Elf village entering one. All of the buildings are comprised mostly of stone, and they use bricks for roads. They're close allies with the centaurs, and most of their forces are mounted. Outside their town, the elves love riding around, often racing with centaurs and each other. And while they keep their distance from the humans, they're not hostile to outsiders. They just prefer their space, hence why they chose the distant areas of the kingdom. Finally, the barony of Shieldon lies near the borders of Friesland and Blackheart, which aren't exactly the best neighbors to have. The largest population of sylvan creatures are the Shahau. Wait, that's how you pronounce it? 30+ years I've been saying it wrong all the time, and now I get a pronunciation guide? Anyways, these creatures realized they needed somebody to help keep the undesirables out, and after some negotiation, they agreed for a baron to be placed in charge of the region. Shieldon is heavily populated with sylvan and fey creatures, who do their best to keep foreign agents and monsters at bay. One issue is the clerics of Bedouin, as one of their immortal archons is a patron of intelligent avians, and the Shahau have shown interest in that religion. The Duke of Westgate has given an order to Baron Shieldon to keep an eye out for trespassers entering the domain. While monsters are a constant threat and the border guards are always on the lookout for Bedouiners, this time around it's the Druids. Normally they are welcome and can move around the nation freely, but for them to avoid roads and even contact from sylvan creatures is highly suspicious. The Duke is right to find that kind of behavior worthy of investigation, as they are more than likely members of the Green Circle. While they aren't doing anything illegal in their sneaking about, if their activities regarding the spell of burgeoning became public knowledge, the Queen would quickly change that. And that, gentle listeners, is the story of Foresthome, the largest kingdom in Alphatia. This video is triple the size of one of my normal videos, as I've covered multiple provinces and introduced at least 6 new creatures into Mystaran lore and canon, including the Nymph and Wemmick. I don't think they brought back the Wemmick into 5th edition, and they're never going to bring back the Nymph because of boobs. You aren't allowed to have scantily clad women in D&D anymore, at least not in the new edition. All of this information is freely available on Bruce Hurd's blog, and I recommend you check it all out. Next up is the settling of the hinterlands, or what's going to happen to Fantasy Gaul as the tribes fall. Until then, I need a drink.